I'm here to talk with you today about the art blender. What is the art blender? For those of you who are not familiar with Amanda Palmer's book, The Art of Asking, that is from whence I have the term art blender. And basically it's just having all of these things that are coming into your life and sticking them in your art. And I used this morning to write this piece. I woke up and I was just like, another day. And I've had days when I've been waking up and I've been really excited about what's gonna happen, but today I was just like, okay, I have some things I've been avoiding that I want to get done. One of them is I have paperwork that I literally have been working on for 2 months. It's not that long. And I've completed it, but now I just need one of those long skinny envelopes that you can fold everything into thirds. So if you are a person who is like, yeah, I get a lot done except for these few things that are remarkably specific and tiny and I haven't totally processed why I'm not doing them. First of all, you can write into that, and if I were gonna write into this right now, and it would be like, okay, cool. Your to-do list is, a list of research projects. What are the things that you don't know that you need to find out to be able to get this done? And for me, in this case, it's where can I buy those kinds of envelopes? And I know I can probably get them at the grocery store, but then my financial efficiency gremlins pop up and they're like, but those are probably more expensive than the other ones. And then it's like, well, I could go to an office supply store, but that would require me to drive to Burlington, and I could go to Amazon and order them, but then that would take an extra 2 days and that would delay the process even more. Or I could ask one of my friends to bring me one over, and I actually did that last night. I was very proud of myself. I asked for help. But they were tired and we didn't really want to do anything anyway. And so that didn't happen. And so now I'm back at square one and I still need one of those longs. I could probably ask my landlord, but then I would have to be vulnerable and ask another question to somebody to help me. And then it's like, well, but then what if I need more later? I should probably just buy them in bulk and then I never have to have this problem again. But then it's that moment of, if I move, then I would just have this huge stack of unnecessary envelopes, and those aren't valuable enough to resell on Craigslist. And they also don't feel valuable enough to have to coordinate a giveaway via Front Porch Forum. And so they might get thrown out, and that would be really sad. And all of this because I just need an envelope that I can fold things into thirds and send it off to my psychiatrist with my paperwork, which includes a questionnaire about ADHD. It's fine. It's good. It all is as it should be. And we're learning, we're growing, we're figuring things out. I think maybe the answer is just go with the easiest option that I can very obviously, not necessarily very obviously. I can afford to go to the grocery store, go to the stationery aisle, get myself a box of trifold envelopes, and send this off into the ether for the probably $3 that would cost. And so I think that would probably be really smart, and then I would have more envelopes. And then I wouldn't have to rely on people for something tiny. And if it's at the grocery store, it would probably be a small enough box that I'm not gonna have 20 bazillion of them. And also it's a fun fact about me that I really love folding things perfectly into thirds, putting stamps on things, and then sending them out. And one of my favorite job activities ever was I worked at a local airport in Beltway, Pennsylvania. And I would be put in charge by my incredible coworker, Shirley. I love her. If by some random chance of fate she ends up watching this, peace be unto you, Shirley, because whenever I would, mess something up in the computer system, she would look at me and she'd be like, there's nothing you can mess up that I don't know how to undo. and we all need that person in our life. But I would be in charge of folding statements, and I got so good at folding them into perfect thirds. Like, it's just a dance. And then I didn't have to write addresses on the envelopes. That's a place where I'll get stuck. I love stickers. I love stamps. I got myself an address stamp because one of the pieces of writing the address was writing my own address, and that is a repetitious task. And repetitious tasks are not, they can be fun, but they're not necessarily fun for me, unless I make them fun. And so I got myself an address stamp, and now I need a stamp pad for it, but I have been using embossing powder, which has been really fun, but that's a multi-step process, and multi-step processes require activation energy. And so I'm just like letting you know that if you're like one of those people who are like, yeah, I get a ton done, but I'm fighting through 50 mental processes to get anything done. And like some people are like, just do a mental override, like, you know, just do it. And it's like, that takes energy too. And it's not every day that I'm like rested enough to be able to just be like, just do it. That like there is an easy way through this. And so I end up following this like little rabbit through my consciousness and seeing all of the interesting things that are there, which is what we've just done. I could write about this. This could go in the art blender. It does go in the art blender. And you're probably actually going to see in this piece that I'm going to read you, a lot of my mental, like processes just get translated directly into my art. And especially my writing, because the thing that I realized in going through gateless writing salons myself was I was told to come as I was, and I was told to just, you know, write down whatever came to mind, not filtering it. And truly, this is how I developed my voice as a writer, was having permission to basically, I got told growing up a lot by teachers, don't write the way you talk. But that is the easiest way for me to write, is in this highly associative way, because I talk the way I think. And so when somebody tells you don't write the way you talk, it's like, well, don't write the way you think. And because writing is a mirror of thinking, they're basically saying, don't think the way you think. Think different. Think better. Think how I think. Think in a way that makes it based on, I don't know why that caught in my throat. It wasn't like a tearful catch, but it was a strong emotion catch. I just, don't think the way you think. And that really bothers me. Like, and it's okay, because it's possible to learn to think different ways. And I'm glad I did that, because, you know, I wish it could have been done in a different way, where it was like, hey, you're gonna need that, so like stick your, you know, default creative voice, you know, somewhere safe, because it's valuable. I wish somebody had told me that. And then here, start a new box, start a new filing system for this academic writing, and you can let them cross-pollinate, and it's going to be really cool. Like, both of your voices are worthwhile, but that was not what I ended up being told. I was just told, don't write how you talk, by teachers who were tired. You know, from teaching, I know that it's really hard to teach in a generous way to a classroom of like, I had like 8 kids a class, and because I was in a small progressive private school, I can only imagine what it's like having 20, 30, you know, 100 some kids in a day. It would be really hard to meet each of them on that level and say like, your voice is valuable, you know, and do all of that care work. So it's not me saying that teachers are crap. Like, that is not the case. It's me saying that the system makes it incredibly hard to interact and build people up on a very human level, on a superhuman level. Really hard to be a superhero when, you know, you're being asked to take on these, it's hard to build superheroes when you're being asked to take on these heroic tasks and you're not given a lot of tools or enough sleep or, you know, all these things. I woke up, I wasn't feeling super motivated. I was like, well, maybe I should do my morning pages, which is a technique from Julia Cameron, and The Artist's Way, which is basically like 3 pages of longhand writing. And I was like, I don't really want to do that, which is not how they're supposed to work. You're supposed to just do them no matter what. But like anytime somebody tells me to do something no matter what, I'm just like, no. And so this is what I came up with. I'm just gonna read it to you. This is unedited. The day that time broke. One day, once and for all, Joni looked up to find that time had broken. She knew because instead of having any rational number on its tiny face, her watch stated that the time was 3, M with a line over it, o'clock, and she did not know what that meant. It was sunny outside, that much she could tell from her tiny garret apartment, the one that reminded her so much of the cubby at the top of the building in college that people told her, when she found it, was a makeout spot. She never went back there. She did, however, find a beautiful top-floor kitchen in another building on campus with an expansive view of a field and the road leading out of campus. She'd walk along that road day after day after day in all seasons. And even when the college put up signs, even when they asked nicely for students to please take the long way around, because it was dangerous, because they cared, because a student might die and cause significant financial and PR liabilities, because they cared. She wouldn't sit up there every day, only once or twice a semester. It was in a residential building, and she had it in her head that the actual residents might start to think she was strange. Also, the actual residents had a habit of leaving dirty dishes in the sink, and it smelled bad and made her sad to see the increasingly plaintive notes that the custodial staff left, asking students nicely to clean the F up after themselves. One day the door was locked and a note was placed on it saying students were no longer allowed in. She wouldn't sit up there every day, only once or twice each semester. It was in, One day the door was locked and a note was placed on it saying that students were no longer allowed in. Seeing the mix of letters and numbers on her clock felt like that. She got dressed anyway. In a long chain of strange days, she had learned that it was important to get dressed anyway. The art blender. This didn't mean she always did it. Some days she felt called to spend more than one day a week in pajamas, and if Christmas had come early, but without the experience of walking through a Kohl's with her mom and her 2 adult cousins singing loudly with Mariah Carey belting about codependency or God. When she got dressed, she put on a lacy black bralette and herringbone fishnets, covering them with almost childish neon floral pink shorts and a button-down and a little navy vest she had bought for the queer aesthetic. She knew she had a meeting later that day, but figured, F it, time was broken, and undid buttons one more than was strictly professional, not because she wanted to be looked at. Or maybe she did. Maybe she wanted to see if when time was broken, people still gave a shit if you wore one kind of fabric under a different kind of fabric. Maybe she wanted to find out if, when time was broken, people still cared that you had skin. Maybe she wanted to see if she could feel a leer through 10 layers of pixels in space-time, or were they like layers of clothing in winter, impervious to wind as long as everything was tucked in, as long as there was no gaposis to interrupt her medically sealed internet reality. Then she put on socks. She tried to brush her hair into some semblance of order before giving up and putting on the Peter Pan themed beanie that she had recently purchased on Etsy. New section. It was a beach day. She could feel sand under her toes, tiny sand shell knives cutting at her soft feet, so small, no calluses. These were the feet that every spring would slough off layers of skin and get all fascinatingly flaky, and she would stay up late picking off the old skin and looking at the patterns in it like she was some kind of fingerprint private eye, but only for the soles of feet. She didn't know then what would have been the point of identifying the culprit. Sometimes she'd take a corner of a sheet of skin and nibble at it, noting that it tasted nothing like the stale wafers they insisted were the body of Christ each week at church. This was the scientific religious method, she thought. But correlation was not causation, and perhaps the wafers were a different cut of Christ. She knew from Mom's roasted chicken that skin tasted very different from the nuggets. Back at the beach, she heard waves roll in one after another, in and out, an infinite circus of slightly different sounds, hushing drylanders, prompting them to pay attention. Joni paid attention directly and with purpose. Her boogie board sat on the edge of the breakwater, living dangerously, able to float away, but not going to because Joni was going to come back for it. She had promised she would, whispered it softly to the dolphins and the planets printed on the polyester cover of the styrofoam slab. But then there were unforeseen circumstances. An adult approached. That broke the spell. Children's covenants with their playthings break and warp in the presence of adults with expectations. And Joni's mom expected her to pose for a photo. So she did. She stuck a leg out like she had seen the women do in her mom's People magazine, and she stuck her chest out proudly, and she grinned, and her mom laughed. Laughed the way moms do when they think their children are going to turn out better than they had dared to hope. Funny, confident, beautiful. And then Joni was running down the beach, calling the names of the dolphins she had befriended, screaming after her board like a jilted husband, all of 10 years old and so filled with rage. The ocean was just doing what it did. She should have paid better attention. There was a guitar at the foot of the recliner chair, 3/4 size, beautiful ivory inlay around the sound hole and shiny pegs crowning the top. She sighed tiredly, noting that if her feet were up in the recliner, there was no possible way for her to tap to time like Skip had told her to. Therefore, she didn't have to practice. That was enough logic for one day, she thought, tapping the remote buttons, reverie under her fingers. She would learn later, when she took apart the remote in secret, that all of the buttons were connected by the same piece of rubber skin. Her mom had asked her not to take the remote apart, or rather, she hadn't asked her anything. When Joni had asked if she could borrow one of the tiny screwdrivers they used to put new batteries in toys, her mom asked why, and she said, to see what's inside of this, and brandished the remote. And then her mom said, you might not be able to put that back together. And did not reach for the tools Joni knew were at the upper shelf of the miscellaneous items kitchen cabinet. Joni figured her mom was right. She might not be able to put it back together, but it was a risk she had to take. She knew from the AV setup man that it was possible to buy a universal remote, and she figured that she got lots of birthday and Christmas presents every year and that those cost money, so if she broke this remote, she'd have to ask, and she could ask her parents to take a new one out of her presents. Problem proactively solved. Inside, the remote was kind of boring. There was a green piece of hard plastic with lots of wires and nubbins stuck to it with metal glue, and there was a compartment for batteries. And there was the button skin, which was Joni's favorite part. She found that if she stretched the holes a little, she could flip the buttons inside out like those little rubber poppers she and her brother had won at the arcade. They were so cool, because you'd flip them inside out and they'd look totally innocuous, but still, and then innocuous and still, and then all of a sudden some adult walked by, they would pop inside, right out, fly into the air and scare the hell out of anyone who hadn't known or had forgotten that they'd been set up. She thought the buttons might be like that, but instead they were pretty content to stay inside out. She could kind of flap the button sheet and some of them would flip right side out again, but with all of them connected together, one flipping didn't cause anything to jump in the air. It was calm to play with the thing, flipping them in and out and in and out and in and out and... Joni! Daddy! "What you up to, bud?" "I broke the remote." She had learned it was better sometimes to confess preemptively than to wait for blame, even if she thought she might be able to fix things. Sometimes when she kept her disassembled things to herself, she wasn't able to fix them back to where they started. Then adults got extra angry and told her she was being dishonest or hiding things. So she stopped trying. So that was what I came up with this morning. Hopefully you enjoyed the little theatrical performance of the art blender. I may, if I get ambitious, go find the absolutely incredible picture of me as a young human on the beach. And for clarity, my parents are great. And they are also just as flawed as parents must be to be able to create interesting people. But I didn't actually take apart remotes as a kid. I just loved that as a device, and yeah, it came to mind. My name is clearly not Joni, but my confirmation state was Joan of Arc, and there's a part of me that thinks through this writing process and thinks about the art blender, and very much, you know, there's the desire to write, you know, really honestly and just write down my life, and, you know, tell you that I woke up this morning with this feeling that, like, you know, after a lot of productive days, realizing that there are still projects that I've been ignoring, and feeling like I'm not going to catch up, and feeling like time right now is really weird and slippery. But that wasn't what wanted to come out. Something more creative wanted to come out. And then there's like running the art blender on super high, where you know, I would spend time trying to invent details, and trying to invent highly specific details to make the writing feel good and feel real. It takes a lot of like inner perceptive energy for me. And so it's often easier to just pull from what's visually around me. So like right now where I'm at, if I were, you know, writing like high fantasy, like if I were writing like, you know, something in a totally different world, it's never a totally different world. That's the kicker. And if you think it is, I hope you create some really beautiful things with that delusion. But if I were, ooh, yeah, this is me bracketing this space in to pull a piece of audio of me and my friend Jordan, and them telling me these Buddhist principles. One of them is like, there are delusions, and I will transform them.
Creations are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless, I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable, I vow to embody it.
That hurts!
That's why Buddhists spend their entire lives contemplating those
Oh my god! That's amazing!
But if I were writing a piece of fantasy right now, I just bought a bottle of rose water last night at the co-op, because while I won't spend $3 on envelopes that I need for medical paperwork at the grocery store, I will spend $3 on a foodstuff that doesn't even totally sound like a foodstuff, that feels like it would make my kitchen feel more like a fancy perfume apothecary. just gonna take a moment, breathe with that realization. I would like you to take a moment to not feel alone for any idiosyncratic choices that you make in your life. Great, glad we've had this time. So if I were writing fantasy, I would take that as inspiration, which is why it's important to surround yourself with beautiful things, because you can stick them in your art. Having art and beauty and lovely things and interesting weird ass things like rose water around you is the most valid. Life is not necessarily about efficiency. I was talking with a new friend named Paige, and Paige, if you're watching this, we've been working on writing and voice and creativity and all these cool things, and I am potentially going to be learning some Chinese from her, and I was like, I really want to go learn some of the characters, and she was telling me to go download the Pinyin keyboard on my phone, and I was like, should I do simplified Chinese or traditional Chinese? And she was like, well, traditional Chinese is harder, it's more challenging, but it's more beautiful. And I was like, sign me up.
It's fine. Everything is fine. It's not like I choose the hard route on purpose.
And then I was saying I wanted to go learn the characters, even though I knew that it would probably be more efficient for me to just learn, you know, spoken conversational stuff. And we both agreed that sometimes what is efficient is not what is going to create the greatest learning. But back to this bottle of rose water. I kind of want to go. I'm gonna get it to show it to you. Because it very much feels it was produced in Lebanon. I wonder how it's pronounced in actually there.
So I don't know how to pronounce Lebanon in Arabic, which I have found out is the Lebanese Arabic is the kind of speech of the land. But I have found out that Mount Lebanon, oh gosh, there's a Mount Lebanon in Pennsylvania. Weird, now I want to know what the connection is. But the name for that apparently comes from the Phoenician word for white, which apparently is like related to, you know, like snow-capped peaks and all of that. So that's a thing that you know now. Congratulations.
This does a lot of good things, because I can pull details, you know, if I'm in a witch's house. I can pull details from the shape of the bottle. I can talk about the shiny lid. I can talk about how there is, you know, ever so slight amount of wear on the lid. And maybe there's some kind of spell in this world where, you know, you're able to tell what has touched an object before, up to a certain point. Or maybe this is some kind of like a little bit sci-fi-ish fantasy, and, you know, it's talking about the glossy label. And maybe it's a little bit dystopic, and maybe this is the last glossy label that was ever printed on a bottle of rose water in Al-Wadi, because it says Al-Wadi at the top, and so that's the town name. Boom, done. And then there are other things, you know, like I started unscrewing the lid, and there's just this waft of rose smell coming into the room, and, you know, I start thinking about like Hunger Games, and I start thinking about like President Snow, who I believe smelled like roses. And so then I get associations, and then it's like, okay, may the gods be ever in your favor, and then all of a sudden I'm in a dice game. And maybe your brain doesn't work like this, and that's okay. But if it does, know that having a really like associative brain that's just like basically clicking all of the links on a Wikipedia article in quick succession or not all of the links, but like starting in one Wikipedia article and like clicking your way to somewhere else. If your brain works like that, it's okay, you can use it. And what you may find is that once you have written, you'll find that there are pieces of the writing that that really link together.
Just for example, in the little story that I wrote, like the idea of skin coming up, the skin on the sole of the foot and the skin on the remote, and these being things that, you know, tie things together and stabilize them and are noticed. And, you know, that was a theme that came up. And then even within just this presentation, thinking about like the art of asking, and the rest of that subtitle is how to stop worrying and let other people help, or something like that. And so even though I'm using the art of asking to talk about the art blender, this other thread that came through about asking my friends for help with getting envelopes so that I could send this paperwork in, you know, I think it really is about, it's the artist's way, which the subtitle for that is the spiritual path to higher creativity. And a lot of that book is, you know, hugely about trusting things to connect and trusting synchronicity. And it definitely sounds a little woo until you start seeing it happen. And then you're just like, whoa, boy, this is some strong sauce. So yeah, it starts to make daily life more magical to see, to let things connect in interesting new ways, and to really start living with an eye toward appreciating those connections. So miniature little joyous aside.
Often the path of least resistance is to jump scenes. And so while I haven't published a lot of super long work, the couple of like little short book length things that I have made for myself do have these scene jumps. And so you don't have to fight your brain. I can't offer you solace quite yet that some large publisher has, you know, published my work, but I know that there are other writers who have done like similar things, like even thinking about, you know, George R.R. Martin and changing voices and changing points of view. And I'm sure that there are people who have messed with time in this way. I'm thinking about like, I think is Italo Calvino, who I believe is an Italian author who's done all kinds of like weird stuff with breaking the fourth wall and fucking around with time. And yeah, so like take your quirks and make them style, basically, and like take the way your brain works and offer yourself the grace and the possibility that maybe how it works automatically could be a creative asset rather than a hindrance. Yeah, and hopefully that was of interest to you. I am gonna go outside in the cold because that was a real detail from this story. It is indeed very sunny outside, so yeah. I hope you're having a beautiful day. If you're looking behind me and you're like, oh my god, that art's really cool, that giant pine cone is a Rachel Nelson piece of art. It's like being friends with a young Georgia O'Keeffe, I swear. She's amazing. And then that is from Bread and Puppet, and this is from my neighbor Willie, who was giving this away. But this is a mystery. Speaking of looking for like fingerprints and things, so this is a piece by P. Murphy. I don't know if it's acrylic or oil, but I looked online And there are other of this person's pieces that exist. I found some of them on eBay, but I do not know who they are, and I really want to know because I like knowing who is in my house. And so, to zoom out enough that you can see it, that is the piece. And I think it's from like the 80s. And I want to know who is P. Murphy. In my head, their name is Pat, but I think that might just be because that's my grand's name. I don't know. So, hope you're having a good day. Take good care of you. I hope this was helpful. Yeah, if your brain works like this, you're not alone. If you're down to just your prettiest underwear because all of the comfy stuff needs to be washed, you are also valid. And take a deep breath. You're a person on the internet. If you've been here this whole time, it's probably about a half an hour, depending on how I edit this down. And that's long enough to give yourself a hug, stand up, do a stretch. That's what I'm gonna do. Okay, take good care of you. Thanks for being here. Hope it was helpful. Bye!
So I ended up going to the store, and they didn't have the envelopes I was looking for. So I re-asked my friend, and they brought me 3 envelopes, which was amazing. And I got my paperwork sent in. Yay, success! Woo!